And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute, Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I do appreciate you being with me. Now, don't forget, later today, this video will air somewhere around 4:30, 5:30, something like that. But later today, I will be debating Mr. Mark Smith, former Christian turned atheist. The proposition will be preterism fails. There's an announcement of the debate on my website with a link that you should be able to follow. The debate will be carried on YouTube on Myth Vision, MYTHVISION, which is hosted by Derek Lambert, who was himself a former believer turned atheist. It's just extremely sad when you have individuals like this that were former believers and now they've turned atheists, they've turned into mockers. When I watch some of the videos on Myth Vision, I literally just have to shake my head at the vitriol and by the way, the illogic. Some of the claims made by many of Derek's guests are so beyond the pale of reason and logic that it's literally astounding. And so, nonetheless, and I will say this, I have something in mind to offer a counter to a lot of the programs that Derek is offering. I don't know if I can get it done, but I've got something I'm working on, just to let you know. So, all right, I have been trying to show, and I've been demonstrating for you, the coming of the Lord of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following is the coming of the Lord of Isaiah chapter 27. And I've been correlating that with the book of Revelation. I've been correlating that with, again, Romans chapter 11. So I want to continue our examination and discussion of what all of this means for us when we look at Isaiah chapter 27, based upon the concept, as I've shared with you many, many times, the concept of metalepsis. Now, let me repeat this, and let me reiterate the extremely important point. Metalepsis is not an invention of preterism. Okay? The scholars who espouse and teach this are world-renowned scholars. There are men like Richard Hayes, R.T. France, N.T. Wright, Scott McKnight, on and on, all right? These men who are incredible scholars about Jewish thought, Jewish principles, Jewish concepts, okay, all tell us that when a New Testament writer quotes from an Old Testament prophetic text, they are bringing that entire context to the mind of their listeners or their readers. Now, I've already shown you the fallacies and the self-contradictions of those who claim on the one hand that I cherry pick by going over here and picking in a verse here and a verse there and saying it applies to the New Testament time. All the while, I'm the one that say, no, I'm not taking just one or two verses. I'm not cherry picking. And yet these are the individuals who have openly stated now that Paul does cherry pick, that Paul does quote from just this verse here, that verse there, and applies them in the way that he wants, totally isolated from, totally divorced from the ancient context. The inconsistency here is staggering. It's incredible. But I must continue. So, based upon the concept of metalepsis, I want to go back to Isaiah chapter 27 now. I've spent a good bit of time showing you that Isaiah 27, the day of salvation, the day of Israel's salvation, would be the time of the destruction of Satan. That's the end of the millennium. And notice how that is verified in verse 2 of Isaiah chapter 27. In that day, what day? The day of the destruction of Satan. In that day is the day of the coming of the Lord out of heaven to vindicate the martyrs. As I've said, ladies and gentlemen, these are some nails. This is a nail A huge nail driven in the wall. We can hang our hat on it. We can know exactly when that was because Jesus told us in Matthew 23. Okay. In that day sing to her, a vineyard of red wine. I, the Lord, will keep it. I water it every moment, lest any hurt it. I keep it night and day. Fury is not in me. Who would set briars and thorns against me in battle? I would go through them. I would burn them together. Or let him take hold of my strength, that he may make peace with me. He shall make peace with me. This is fascinating, isn't it? God says, my enemies can't stand. Those who try to resist me and fight me, it won't work. Let them make peace with me. What a beautiful image. Instead of fighting God, we need to make peace with him. The peace that is only found in Jesus Christ. As Paul said, in Philippians chapter 4, as he prayed for the Philippians, that God would give them the peace of mind which passes all understanding. There is a confidence, there is an assurance, there's a peace of mind for those of us who are brethren, those of us who are in Christ Jesus, who even in the most troublesome of times, there is that assurance and that is that peace of mind that, as Paul expressed it in Romans chapter 8, nothing can separate us from the love of God which is in Christ. I saw a painting made, if I remember correctly, the painting was done in like the 18th century, in the 17th centuries. I may have the date totally wrong. But it is a painting of this huge boulder set out in the sea. And the waves are just roaring, white caps thundering, waves crashing against the boulder. And here set in a little nook, out of the wind, out of the waves, is a dove setting on her nest. And the name of the painting, and I'm not good at paintings, but I believe that the name of the painting was Peace. God has never promised to shelter us either from temptation or from pain. I was talking just this last weekend, some very good friends of mine who are believers recently lost their loved ones. But the peace and the confidence that they have because of their faith in Jesus Christ cannot be matched. Well, okay, I got to move on. So here is this peace that God was calling on the enemies, his enemies. Make peace with me. Don't fight me because it's futile. But you see what he's saying here, in that day, the day of the destruction of Satan's destruction, that is the day of Israel's salvation. By the way, what is the day of Israel's salvation? Well, according to Isaiah 25, verse 9 and 10, it's the day of resurrection. The resurrection of Isaiah 25, verse 8. So, Isaiah 25, 8 to 10 is the day of Israel's salvation. It is the time of the resurrection. And in Isaiah 27, 1 and following, the time of Israel's salvation, the salvation of the vineyard, is the time of the destruction of Leviathan, Satan, at the coming of the Lord for the vindication of the martyrs. Do you see the unity here? Do you see the beauty here? We can't cherry pick these verses. We cannot take Jehoiakim's penknife and just slice it all to pieces and say, well, Paul quoted this and used it accommodatively. He used it for his own purposes, separated and isolated and divorced from the original context, don't you know? What a horrible hermeneutic. Absolutely a horrible hermeneutic. But again, I must move on. Now then, for time, verse 7. Has he, Yahweh, struck Israel as he struck those Who struck him? Because you see, the Lord had a way of using another nation to punish Israel. Then, when he was through using that nation to punish Israel, he would destroy that nation. He did it to the Assyrians. But to continue, has he struck Israel as he struck those who struck him? Or has he, Israel, been slain according to the slaughter of those who were slain by him? And that's a little bit difficult. I understand that. But here's the point. Has Israel been slain? In measure. How? How did God slay Israel? By sending her away. You see, we see this illustrated beautifully, defined beautifully in Ezekiel chapter 37, in which Daniel, in which Ezekiel saw the valley of the dead bones. And Ezekiel was asked, Son of man, what are these bones? And he said, I don't know. And the Spirit said, these are the whole house of Israel. Whole house, all 12 tribes now, that has gone into captivity. When they were in captivity, separated from the land, separated from the city, separated from the temple, they were viewed as death. J.D. Watts, in his commentary on Isaiah, said there was an umbilical cord of life between Israel and the land. To be separated from the land was to be dead, not biologically, but covenantally. We would use the term spiritually. You see, preterists did not invent the idea of spiritual death or covenant death. No. We're following the lead of some of the world's best scholars. What's the point? God in Isaiah chapter 27 had killed Israel by sending her into captivity. Now, if the death of Isaiah 27 and chapter 25 was covenantal, spiritual death of being sent off into captivity, then what do you suppose is the nature of the resurrection? Death, resurrection. So, right here in Isaiah 27, we have death defined. Now, is Romans chapter 11 concerned with Israel's resurrection? Well, Paul said in Romans chapter 11, verse 15, if the casting off of Israel be the salvation and the benefit and the riches of the Gentiles, then how much more her conversion will be life from the dead. Her conversion would be life from the dead. Spiritual life, spiritual resurrection. When would that take place? Second coming. It's not biological resurrection at all. Oh, but wait. Romans chapter 11 is Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. So if the resurrection of Romans 11, being based upon Isaiah chapter 27, is not talking about biological death and biological resurrection, then when we come to Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, which is the coming of the Lord for salvation and resurrection, then it's not talking about biological resurrection either. Talking about the same kind of salvation of Matthew chapter 24, 29 to 31, the gathering together of the elect, at the sound of the great trumpet, which is drawing on Isaiah 27, verse 13, the promise and the prediction of the resurrection of whom? Oh, those were scattered abroad, those who were in captivity. You know, the dead. Not biologically dead, covenantally dead, spiritually dead. So we have this beautiful chain. Isaiah 27, destruction of Leviathan, Satan at the time of the resurrection, which is the time of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, which is the time of Romans chapter 11, which is the time of Revelation chapter 20, 10 and following. Out of time. Now, tomorrow I'm going to begin an examination and a refutation of Doug Wilson's recent video that he did on the error of, quote, hyperpreterism. He gives 10 reasons, and then he's followed up on that with another little diatribe. And you need to know this. I have now challenged Doug Wilson to debate me formally, either publicly in person or in a formal YouTube debate. At least twice, and even prior to that, I have not received so much as a word of response. Not one. And you know, I'm real easy to reach. So, tomorrow, I'm going to begin examining Doug Wilson's 10 reasons why hyperpreterism, as he calls it, slanderously, is wrong. You don't want to miss this, because recently Doug Wilson, along with a host of other Reformed men, signed this letter condemning Gary DeMar for refusing to condemn hyperpreterism. Now, by the way, I've issued a challenge for any one of the leading signers of that letter to debate me, formally debate me. You know what? Total, absolute silence. Wonder why that is. Well, anyway, out of time. I'll see you on the flip side.